I appeal to all parties involved in the conflict for an immediate ceasefire in and around Palmyra. It is an extremely important World Heritage Site which belongs to the whole of humanity.
We've had the privilege and the honor of serving alongside many of our NATO brothers, and so this training operation is just an extension of that. And so it's a fantastic opportunity for NATO members to train with the Georgians, and specifically with their contributing force to the NATO response force.
The reason we need $15 is so that we can afford an education, so we can leave McDonald's and do something with our lives. The reason we need $15 is so that we can keep mothers in their homes, taking care of their families, and that so we can survive.
There comes a time in the history of nations when fear and complacency allow power to accumulate and liberty and privacy to suffer. That time is now, and I will not let the Patriot Act, the most unpatriotic of acts, go unchallenged.
Welcome to Hardline. I'm Rick Blackwell, in for Ed Berliner. What's more important to the American public? Freedom from fear of Big Brother listening into our phone conversations, or the dragnet of catching the few bad guys hiding within our midst? The House overwhelmingly passed the surveillance reform bill, the USA Freedom Act, last week, containing a provision to end the bulk collection of American phone records. Senator Rand Paul, a Republican presidential candidate, so opposed to NSA spying on citizens that he and a few colleagues spoke for 10.5 hours, blocking any motion on the floor. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has promised a vote on the bill, but he also seems bent on extending the Patriot Act as it is, citing American safety. Welcome to the Hardline, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra. Welcome, sir.
Hey, good to be with you, Rick. Thank you.
Really appreciate your background on this, obviously, with your work with the House Intelligence Committee. You know, Senator Paul said he's tired, worn out, ready to go home. We're going to talk about the policy aspects, but first, you're a longtime Washington observer. From a standpoint of whether this is going to be successful or not, what did you think? Was it just political rhetoric, or do you think it will get somewhere with people maybe on the fence on this issue?
Well, I think it's very, very clear that the NSA program is going to be modified from the program that I approved way back in 2004. If we go all the way that Senator Paul is recommending, which is total elimination of the program, I think that that's a problem. I've got concerns about where we go with this Freedom USA program, because it will not provide our intelligence community with the flexibility, the agility, and the speed with which it is going to need to respond to threats. But all of the mischaracterization of this program over the last number of years has resulted in where we are today. The program's going to change, and we're going to lose an effective tool in the fight on terrorism.
Well, you were there in the beginning, 2004, when the Patriot Act was first getting started. Talk about the intent. Has it lived up to the intent? Has it been an effective tool for the United States in trying to fight terrorism overseas?
It's one of many tools in our intelligence community and in our law enforcement toolbox to find the potential terrorists, to identify them, and to stop them. By itself, you know, it's not a magic bullet. It's part of a much larger picture that we gain on the threats in the United States. If we lose this capability, you know, will there be a terrorist attack tomorrow because we've lost this capability? No, but it will make law enforcement less effective. In terms of, you know, the intent was always to get metadata. That means phone numbers, length of calls, who called what number. It has never captured the content of what's in those phone calls, what one person says to another. And that, I think, is the big mischaracterization of this program and why it's in trouble. The Americans think that we're listening to the calls, and we're not.
The modifications that you talked about earlier that you think eventually may pass, will that lessen the effectiveness of the Patriot Act?
It will, because what it will do is it'll leave the the metadata, that information. It will leave it in the hands of the companies, and what will then happen is, to get a complete picture of bad guy in Pakistan calling the American number in the USA, for us then to find out where that number may have called or who else it may have called, we will have to go to a number of different phone companies to run through that process, rather than having that data in one place where we can very, very quickly. It will give us a less complete picture, and it will take more time to get it done.
And I think the message that a lot of American citizens, sometimes when they hear political analysts or politicians like Senator Paul, is that they're concerned that somebody is listening. Big Brother is listening to their phone calls. Can you say right now that basically that would not happen, and that they're just going after strictly information?
The NSA will never listen to the content of a phone call until or when law enforcement gets the wiretapping approval from a court of law. The NSA does not have the content. It cannot go back and get the content of phone calls. It can only move forward in getting content when law enforcement in the United States goes to a judge and the judge says there's probable cause, and you now have the authority to listen in, but then it will be the FBI, state, or local law enforcement. It will not be our intelligence community.
Congressman Pete Hoekstra is our guest. We were talking a little bit off air, Congressman Hoekstra, about the politics of all this. Is Senator Paul really on an island on this issue, not really in the mainstream Republican thinking as far as the Patriot Act is concerned? Do you feel like this will be an issue in the presidential campaign?
Well, I think it clearly distinguishes him in a bad way from the rest of the Republicans. The rest of the Republicans are calling for some more transparency and perhaps some more judicial review beyond what we already have. But no one is going as far as Senator Paul in terms of saying the Freedom USA Act is insufficient. I want to stop all of it. I think it's interesting. We've just had this this gruesome murder in Washington. And it appears that, with the information that we're getting today, is that they've identified a possible suspect because they picked up his DNA off of the crust of a pizza. That means law enforcement got information, they got the DNA, and ran it through what? They ran it through a database that the government has and identified the suspect. That's exactly how the NSA program works. Senator Paul would take that whole database, all of that stuff, out of the hands of our law enforcement and intelligence community to identify the bad folks.
And sometimes I feel like we don't really hear enough about some of these success stories, what the NSA is able to accomplish. I want to shift gears real quick. You just got back from 10 to 12 days, I believe, in Israel. Talk about your experiences in the Middle East. What are Israelis saying right now about the potential Iran deal, and in general about what's going on right now in the Middle East?
They're very nervous. I mean, they live with this threat of annihilation each and every day. Their borders are in chaos. They're concerned about what's going on in Syria. Obviously, they're very concerned about this Iranian deal. They're looking for the kind of American leadership that they've experienced for 60 years, with America standing up against terrorists. They're very concerned as to where the United States policy is headed with this administration, but they are committed to maintaining a strong and an enduring relationship with the United States. They need this relationship. They're committed to it. They're concerned where we're headed.
Well, in the final 30 seconds, where is this relationship right now? Would you say it has been damaged?
I think that there's some problems, obviously, with this administration, with Netanyahu. But the bottom line is, we've got strong political, military, and economic ties at just about every level. This relationship is still very, very strong. It can survive, the rocky relationship between our two countries. We've got much more, or the leaders of our two countries. We've got a strong relationship moving forward. Absolutely.
All right, a strong voice in Congress when he was in Washington, D.C. We appreciate the insight. Congressman Pete Hoekstra, thank you so very much from Michigan.
Thank you.
We come back, Republicans versus Democrats, right versus left. We're going to have a conversation. Stay tuned. This is Hardline on Newsmax.